Hello, what's your name?
Warren Dorsey.
When did you attend this school?
I started the school here in September of 1926.
When did you leave the school?
I left the school in 1930. The county was engaged in what they then were calling consolidation of schools. But actually, what they were doing was reducing costs of providing education for children of color. See, every little enclave in those days, every little enclave of African American students had a teacher. Sometimes it's just a handful, maybe a half dozen or so, teacher of dubious training to be a teacher. But the county decided, well, it is cheap to operate it by consolidating. And we were, the 5th, 6th, and 7th grades were pulled out of this school and were placed at Johnsville, which is a small, at that time, African-American enclave just northwest of Eldersburg, about a mile, mile and a half.
So this school went from like kindergarten to 7th grade?
No kindergarten at all in schools until very recently, 1st through 7th.
1st through 7th.
Yes.
Okay, so when were you born exactly?
I was born November the 17th, 1920.
Okay. So what was a typical school day like here?
I suppose not in principle, not too much different than today, except that there were 7 grades here, a single teacher, and she attempted to meet the needs of them in the basics, mostly reading, writing, and calculating. And the school was divided the school room was divided in grades. We were grouped by year, and the teacher assigned instructional materials for one group while she went to another to provide individual attention. And this is how the day went.
How did you get to school? Did you walk or?
Yeah, we didn't live far from here. I lived up on the hill here about a quarter of a mile away.
I see.
It was different when they moved us from here to Johnsville. One of the peculiarities that it may seem to you, the county's way of providing education for children of color, the basic principle in those days was that there was no need to provide us any education, really. They weren't going to do anything else anyway except work in service kinds of jobs for them. So they put us out in Johnsville, but the county provided no transportation. They did for white kids, but not for children of color.
I see.
So we were left to our own designs. Fortunately, the gentleman who had the franchise for hauling white kids into Sykesville School, which was right at the entrance of what is now, was even then, Springfield State Hospital. The school was right at the entrance there. And they hauled white kids in. If we got there at a time that he happened to be there, he would take us out to Eldersburg because he lived in Winfield. And he used to drive his bus back home. And if we happened to be there, he would take us out that far. And then we walked the rest of the distance in. If we weren't able to catch a ride, we were faced with walking, which is, I don't know, about 4.5 miles altogether, I guess, to the Johnsville School.
So what content were you taught here? What subjects did you learn?
Reading, writing, arithmetic, spelling, civics, the usual stuff, geography.
Which one was your favorite?
My favorite has always been mathematics. I've always been good in math. My weakest was spelling, And to this day, I'm still weak at spelling. Although I've been to many schools over the years.
So how did society treat you generally as a colored person? Were you treated different than white people?
Sykesville was no different in principle in how people of color were treated than the stories you've heard about Mississippi and Alabama. This was a rigidly segregated society here. Only contact between the races was incidental, except, well, it was still incidental. The whites operated the commerce, the stores and all. We used to go to the stores when it was necessary. The work was provided, like maids, housemaids, cooks, cleaning ladies, yard work for men. And in the summertime, especially during the crop season, day work on farms. Some few had year-round jobs working on farms, but no social contact. One exception, which puzzles anybody. It puzzled me, although I didn't give much thought to it at the time. Out across, about maybe a half mile from here, the Patapsco River runs through Sykesville. There was a swimming hole called the Rocks. You could swim there in the nude. Only boys were ever swim there. But kids from our community and kids from the white community, boys, all boys, swim there.
So that was basically
Nobody ever objected to that.
that was like the only time you met each other?
Yeah, I never understood why. They got along fine. The town accepted the fact that this was the swimming hole, and we all swam there. But that was the absolute limit of any contact.
I see. What sort of training did your teachers have? Did they go to college or go to a special school?
I honestly don't know. In the days when I started, later on, when my youngest sister went here, they did have a teacher who was trained in a teacher college. The teacher, when this school was established in 1904, it opened. Teachers were recruited from communities outside of the county, and I guess even, well, outside the county, certainly. The state did not train African-American teachers. They had no school for training them. The only place I know of in those days that trained teachers for African-American students was Baltimore City. It operated a school called the Coppin Normal School, a two-year school above high school that trained teachers for the Baltimore school system. The teacher I had came out of Baltimore. I don't know that she went to Coppin. She may not have had much more education than what a seventh grader would have even here. But she was our teacher.
Were there school rules here that you had to follow?
Rules?
Yeah.
The rules were whatever the teacher decided they were going to be. And she had her own enforcement method. Today, I guess they would call it corporal punishment. I guess you know what that means. You could be spanked for any reason that the teacher deemed appropriate. And with my mother, if you got a spanking in school, you got a spanking when you got home also, because she accepted the principle that a teacher wouldn't be punishing you unless you had done something that was not acceptable. And she insisted that we behave in school. She insisted that we did as much as we could to learn as much as we could and to behave.
So what were some of the rules a teacher usually came up with that you needed to follow?
We were restricted in talking except at recess times. We were restricted in manner of play if we were on the playground. We were required to be on time. We were required to be courteous to each other, and also, which wasn't really necessary, we were required to be courteous to her, because we were reared to be courteous to our elders, to be respectful of our elders.
Was there like a particular rule you had trouble following?
No. We were well trained by my mother. There was no problem.
How has society changed since you left this school?
Oh, gracious. There has been a greater access to education. There has been a breakdown of the barrier in public accommodations. There has been innovations at most levels for job opportunities, for decent housing, for conduct of one's daily life, whether it be his social life or economic life. Tremendous changes.
Mm-hmm. What was life like outside of school for you?
We lived up on top of the hill here, as I told you. We had a bit of acreage. Most of our summers, particularly, was spent in raising food. We raised a lot of garden crops. We also raised crops for feeding animals. We had a horse, we had a cow, we raised pigs, chickens. Most of the food to maintain our livestock we raised. Most of the food we ate, we raised. Money was scarce. Often we had to do without, like one typical example, my mother used to spend the summers cooking, canning, preserving, and she made a lot of jelly. It takes a lot of sugar to make jelly. At times when there wasn't money to buy sugar to make jelly, she would can the juice of fruits and berries. And later on, maybe sometime later on, if money became available where she could buy sugar, she would open the jars of juice and make it into jelly. So we spent most of our time raising food, gathering wood, things that are necessary for survival.
I see. How many siblings did you have that went to this school with you?
There were 12 in our family. That means I had 11 brothers and sisters. All of them went to this school.
All of them?
All 12.
Were you the oldest?
No, I'm the 9th child.
Did you have homework when you went here?
Oh, yes. And what was the rule at our house, if you came home without any declared homework, that means that you admit to, my mother made sure that she found something for you to do. There was studying every night. School was a sacred mission for us, because my mother said, as long as we accepted the status quo, we would never rise above the way that we lived in this community. She said, if you're ever going to break out of this, get away from here, you've got to get an education. So you did all you could to learn as much as you could.
I see. Where did you bring to school with you when you came from your house?
Most of the time, occasionally we brought our lunch, but most of the time we went home during lunch period. We had our school books. We had a cup. We used to have little collapsible drinking cups, metal cups. There was no running water here. Well, I say no running water. We did have running water. The teacher gave you a pail and then run up to the spring to get the water. And we had a common bucket for drinking water. If you had a cup, you could use the dipper and pour your water in the cup and drink from it. Those and others could make fashion cups from paper, sheets of paper. And on other occasions, the kids drank out of the dipper that also rested in the bucket. Today would be considered unsanitary. That was not an issue when I was a youngster.
How did the teacher differentiate instructions between the different grade levels?
We had school material that was supposed to be grade appropriate, and she functioned in that fashion. But since all grade levels were instructed in this one room, there was a lot of cross-grade teaching by the teacher and also by the students themselves. We learned from each other.
How did you eat lunch here? I think you mentioned earlier that you usually went home.
Yeah, usually we went home. When you came to school, if you had your lunch, you stuck in your desk until lunchtime. There was no refrigeration or anything, and you pulled it out when it was time to eat, and devoured whatever you had brought from home. Usually, it wasn't anything fancy. With us, we used to have syrup sandwiches. I don't know if you know what syrup that you use on pancakes, and spread that on bread. All the bread we ever had was homemade bread, and there was no like lunch meat in it. That was non-existent. That was your lunch. So you ate that and drink a little water, and that was your lunch.
I see. What were some chores that you had at the beginning of the school day?
What, here?
Or at
Or at home? Well, at home, we always had to make sure there was wood in the house for my mother. We had a cook stove, which supplied means of preparing food and also the heat. We gathered our own wood from a lot of the land we had was woodland, where we cut wood. We had to make sure there was enough wood in the house. Water had to be carried from the spring. We had to make sure that there was water that my mother would need during the day. And on the particular days, like on wash day, a lot of water had to be carried to make sure. We had to make sure that there was water for the chickens. The horse and the cow were pastured in the field. There's also the spring was within the confines, and they could find their own water. But for the pigs and the chickens, water had to be carried for them. And ordinary chores for cleaning and that sort of thing had to be taken care of before we went to school. At lunchtime, we went home, and after school.
Okay. What was your favorite recess game that you could play here?
I don't know. We used to play dodgeball. I used to love dodgeball. We used to play catch a lot. There was not much room for like a baseball or softball. So we played catch. We played horseshoes. We shot marbles. The girls played jacks and ring games, things of that sort.
I see. What segregation laws affected you when you went to school here?
Well, the most obvious one is that you went to a segregated school. Segregation was mandated by law, even in the state of Maryland. Segregation was on transportation was mandated by law, although we rarely ever went any place anyway. Had no car, and it was almost any place you went, you walked. Occasionally, we'd hook the horse up to the wagon, and that was a means of transportation. But all of the opportunities that are now provided in jobs, education, housing, public accommodation were strictly segregated.
So what is life like for you now? What did you do after you left school?
After I left school, you're missing a whole lot of interesting stuff. How I got to where I am now, and you don't have time for that either. Since I've been out of school, and I've been through, even through graduate school, I have been employed, retired from microbiology. I was a microbiologist for about 25 years with the Department of Defense in biological warfare research. I left that when our president decided that we no longer should be investing in biological warfare research. And I went back to school and got a master's degree in elementary education. I taught elementary school for a couple of years. I was an assistant principal for a few years. I was a principal at the latter stage of my working career, and I retired from that, been retired for some years. And since then, I live the life of a retired gentleman. That is doing anything I want, whenever I want to.
All right, one last question. How many students attended here regularly?
About 20, about half a dozen to 30, 24 to 30.
I see. And I heard that you can sing very well.
I don't know where you heard that.
Well,
If you say, I heard you can sing, yeah. The qualifier you use, that is subject to interpretation.
so do you think you could sing us a song?
You don't really hear me sing. If I sang at all, it'd be something simple if I sung there. I do sing. I sing a lot. I sing in a church. I've sung in high school, college. My best experience was in the service, in the Army. We had a tremendously gifted glee club and a very well-trained director, and I sang in it. That was probably the most satisfying experience in singing that I had, because we had a lot of people who were good singers, who came from various walks of life, including like Broadway plays, who had been drafted into the service, ended up in a singing group in the Army. Since then, mostly I sing on occasion in places where people ask me to, but I sing in church. I sing regularly in our church.
Was the armed service segregated when you were in it?
Yes, very much so. And that presented a problem also, because during this, I served during the Second World War. At that time, the Army was about getting as many people in the fighting forces as it could. The problem, because we were losing a lot of people. We lost a lot of soldiers in North Africa and in Europe. So there was demand, a heavy demand for recruits. The problem with recruiting African Americans was a strict segregated army. Most of what soldiers did prior to the Second World War, most of the jobs they had were service jobs. They were the cooks, they were the bakers, they were the laundrymen, they were the truck drivers, that sort of thing, and laborers. But the Army was faced now with drafting a fair number of African Americans who had college education, and just didn't seem to be right to put him with a pick and axe. I had a classmate who had, by the time he was drafted to the Army, he had a degree in law and had passed the state bar for practicing law. He was drafted. the Army had no place to put him. He ended up as a truck driver. In the base where I served at Fort Lee in Virginia, they had a consolidated mess that was eating facility for several different companies. They counted, they had head count as people entered and left the cafeteria, the mess hall. The person who the Army appointed to do that was a young PhD from Harvard who mastered in mathematics. His job that the Army gave him was counting how many people came in and out of the mess hall. So yes, that was a real problem.
Okay. What's your family like now?
Of the 12 kids, and my mother and father, there are only 3 of us still surviving. I have 2 sisters who ordinarily would be here, but I understand that they, well, I know they have a pressing commitment elsewhere, and it's just the 3 of us left.
I think that's it.
Can I ask him to sing again?
I'll see. Well, when I was at Johnsville, I had a teacher, Miss Bell, who I considered to be an ogre. She was a dominating influence in the classroom. She ruled her classroom. We thought that she was awful. But before I went to Johnsville, I had very poor reading skills. In the first half year I was at Johnsville, Miss Bell, with all of her dominating ways of instruction, taught me how to read. And reading opened up a whole new world to me. And it does for anybody. Most of you who've come through a fairly decent education system don't realize what a remarkable thing it is to be able to read. See, no longer are you limited by your own little world, which may not involve much beyond the activities of your own family. But if you're able to read, you can find out what kids do elsewhere. You can find out what places are outside of the community where you live, and even what other countries are like. A marvelous revelation to a young man who couldn't read before. So she taught me to read. But she used to sing with us. But she had her own interpretation of songs. She was determined that we understood that we were worthy people and not necessarily what the majority of society tried to label us. But she taught us that this was our country and we should be proud of it, that we were part of it. We helped to make it. And she taught us a song, My Country 'Tis of Thee, is commonly called, a little differently than what you may know it. And I'll sing one verse of that for you. It goes, some of you heard me before. It goes, my country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, from every mountainside let freedom ring. Let freedom ring, 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 let freedom ring. Let freedom ring, 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 let freedom ring. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. If you want to hear me sing something that is a little more musical, come to my church Sunday morning. I'm going to sing a solo.